Hello, welcome to HIV Disclosure 201, with more information designed for providers. Note that we also have a shorter version that's great to share with clients. Check out our YouTube page for details. My name is Todd Fuqua. I go by Professor Peacock in the community, and I'm also a person living with HIV since 2012. I'm part of HIV Modernization Movement Indiana, and our mission is to modernize Indiana's HIV criminal and related public health laws. We put together this video because we recognize it may take years to change the laws. But in the meantime, there are things that we can do to educate people living with HIV about the laws that can reduce the risk of them being falsely accused of non-disclosure or help them out in a situation where they might be facing charges. So today we're going to go over a case for disclosure, the duty to inform law in Indiana, and then some best practices for disclosure. I will say at the outset that this information does not constitute legal advice. I am not a lawyer. This is for general information purposes only. So this is my HIV Disclosure 101 in a single slide. There's some really useful resources here on the right-hand side. There's a handout from POZ magazine and one from the CDC. You can scan the QR codes and make those available to your clients. These resources are really good for general conversations about disclosure and can help give your clients some tips and tricks. Today's workshop, HIV Disclosure 201, is really about the intersection of disclosure and our law in Indiana. And it really shows up when it comes to dating and sexual and needle-sharing partner situations. There's a really good video here from Lambda Legal that makes a case for disclosure. I would encourage you to scan the QR code and watch it at some point with the rest of this material. So if disclosure is the best practice, why is it so hard? Well, I think there's lots of reasons for non-disclosure, and we need to keep these in mind as we're supporting people living with HIV. There's a very good chance that a person may not have known their HIV status. It's also possible that the person didn't really understand their responsibilities around the duty to inform law. And then, of course, probably the biggest reason is stigma and fear of rejection. What I always like to remind people is there is rejection before HIV, and there's going to be rejection after HIV. So just try to take some things with a grain of salt. As you'll learn later, in some states like Indiana, if there's no transmission risk, then the law doesn't require disclosure. And then, of course, sex can be complicated, right? There are some people where it's tied to meeting their basic needs. They might be in an abusive relationship, or they might get housing in exchange for sex. Lots of different reasons why someone may not disclose. Of course, we don't get to practice this in school, so many of us lack the communication skills or self-esteem to be able to have the conversation. We don't coach people on how to do this, and that's maybe something you could consider with your clients. Do a little bit of a role play. And then, of course, one or both parties might have been under the influence of a drug or sexually aroused, and that may have affected their judgment. The one we see often in our research is disclosure did occur, but there's no documentation to prove it. And it really becomes my word against the other person's word, and they're always going to believe the person not living with HIV. And lastly, sadly, there are people who have the intention of transmitting HIV to others and doing so maliciously. Unfortunately, these are the cases that often make the headlines and send a skewed message, because most people that I've met who are living with HIV wouldn't wish this on anybody else. If anything, we're overly concerned about the potential risk of passing on HIV to somebody else. So for these cases, we will probably always need some sort of law around disclosure. The best practice is known as an intentional disease transmission law. We'll touch on that a little bit later on. So wrapping this up, disclosure is the best practice when it's safe to do so and when the information won't be used against the person. It's really a deeply personal decision, and there's more than one right answer depending on the circumstances. If I'm having a one-time hookup with someone, I might answer differently than if I'm interested in a longer-term dating relationship. And that's understandable. What we want to do is educate people about the law, along with their risks and responsibilities, so they can make an informed decision.